The world seemed to tilt beneath me as Victoria's words landed with surgical precision. "We're restructuring your position." The conference room's temperature seemed to plummet 20 degrees, while the fluorescent lights suddenly burned too bright against my retinas. My fingertips went numb as I watched her straighten, almost imperceptibly. A subtle shift that spoke volumes. She was enjoying this. Beside her, Felicity from HR adjusted her watch band with practiced indifference, both of them waiting for my reaction with barely concealed anticipation. 15 years of my life, my work, my innovation, all being dismissed in a sterile conference room on a Tuesday morning. The leather portfolio I'd brought, filled with next quarter's research projections, now felt absurdly heavy in my lap. "My name is Rachel. I'm 55, and I created the algorithm that transformed an industry. This is the story of how I reclaimed my rightful place after they tried to erase me." "The company is moving in a new direction," Felicity added, sliding a manila folder across the polished table. "Your contributions have been valuable, but we're consolidating the research division." The folder contained what I already knew it would: a severance package designed to be just generous enough to discourage legal action. My fingers didn't tremble as I accepted it without opening it. I'd built systems that processed millions of calculations per second, yet they thought I couldn't calculate the timing of my own dismissal. "I completely understand," I replied, my voice eerily steady. "These decisions are never easy." Relief flickered across their faces. They'd expected tears, perhaps, or angry protests. The emotional outburst of a woman past her prime. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment for precisely 23 days, ever since a misdirected email had appeared in my inbox, revealing their plans with stark corporate language. Transition of legacy personnel. The email had been part of a thread between Edward, Victoria, and the legal department discussing the timeline for my removal and the reclamation of my research division. "We'd like you to clean out your desk by Friday," Victoria continued, the satisfaction in her voice barely concealed. "We'll need your keycard, company laptop, and phone. Your team will be notified this afternoon." My team. 6 brilliant engineers who called me Dr. J behind my back, a nickname born of respect, not mockery. The same team that had helped me develop the distributed processing algorithm that now powered DynamicTech's flagship product, FinanceSphere, accounting software used by 42% of Fortune 500 companies. "Of course," I said, rising with deliberate calm. "Is there anything else?" They exchanged glances, thrown by my composure. Victoria recovered first. "That's all for now. Thank you for making this professional." As I walked back to my office, I passed the executive boardroom where CEO Edward Mitchell was leading the quarterly review. Through the glass wall, I could see him gesturing at a slide titled Q3 Revenue Projections. The same Edward Mitchell who had taken sole credit for my algorithm at last year's technology summit, referring to me only as one of our research team members in his keynote speech. I closed my office door and pulled out my personal phone, sending a text. "It's happening. Friday is my last day." The response appeared almost instantly. "Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details." I permitted myself a small smile as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Today was Tuesday. On Friday, I would leave DynamicTech for the last time, and Monday would be extraordinary. That evening, I met James Wilson at Sapphire, an upscale restaurant 17 miles from DynamicTech's headquarters. As the CEO of Integral Systems, DynamicTech's largest competitor, James understood the value of discretion. We'd first connected 6 months ago at an industry conference after his insightful questions about my algorithm made it clear he truly understood its significance. Unlike my own CEO, we'd maintained a professional correspondence ever since, discussing theoretical improvements to distributed processing systems. The restaurant's soft lighting reflected off his glasses as he shook his head. They actually went through with it. I suspected they might, but to dismiss the very architect of their core technology. "Edward never understood what I actually created," I replied, cutting into my untouched salmon. "He saw the implementation, the interface, the marketing potential, but the underlying architecture, that was just tech stuff to him." The irony was delicious. 3 months earlier, I discovered that the patent application for my algorithm had never been filed. An administrative oversight, they'd claimed. They'd planned to push me out before securing the patent, knowing intellectual property developed by employees typically belonged to the company. What Dynamic Tech didn't know was that I'd been working on refinements to the algorithm on my own time, using my personal equipment. Those improvements, which increased processing efficiency by 43%, weren't covered by my employment agreement. After discovering the misdirected email about my planned dismissal, I had meticulously documented my work process. Time-stamped videos of coding sessions and digital notarization of my development logs, all done evenings and weekends on my home equipment. I had quietly filed for a patent under my own name, fully documented with timestamps proving the work was completed outside company time. All the paperwork is finalized, James said, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. As soon as you sign, Integral Systems officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent. The press release goes out Monday announcing you as our new Chief Innovation Officer. I reviewed the documents carefully. A 7-figure signing bonus, equity in Integral Systems, and royalties from all products using my algorithm. James and I had been laying this groundwork since I'd contacted him about the patent situation 3 weeks ago, after finding that damning email. "What do you think Edward's face will look like when he realizes what's happened?" James asked, a hint of mischief in his eyes. I looked up from the contract. "I'm more concerned about my team," I admitted. "They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout." James nodded. "We have positions for all 6 of them, senior roles with significant raises." I signed the final page. In one move, I had secured my future, protected my team, and reclaimed ownership of my work. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of exit interviews and carefully worded goodbyes. I maintained my professional facade throughout, even as rumors spread. I documented everything meticulously, every project, every password, every process, evidence that I had acted in good faith while the company had not. During my final exit interview, Felicity went through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency. "You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of Dynamic Tech," she stated, not looking up from her tablet. "Of course," I replied evenly. "Anything developed within the scope of my employment using company resources during company time." I emphasized each qualifier deliberately, but Felicity was too busy checking boxes to notice the precise language I was using. As I packed my desk, Victoria stopped by, leaning against the doorframe with artificial casualness. "You know, these restructuring decisions are never personal," she said, watching me place my awards into a cardboard box. "Edward feels the company needs to move in a more youthful direction." I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "I understand completely. Business is business." Something in my tone made her pause, but she quickly dismissed whatever doubt had flickered across her mind. What could a soon-to-be unemployed 55-year-old woman possibly do? "Will you be taking time off?" she asked with synthetic concern. "Actually, I already have something lined up," I replied, closing the box. "I start Monday." Surprise flashed across her features. "That's fast. Anything interesting?" I smiled. "Very, a leadership position." As I walked out of Dynamic Tech's headquarters for the final time, I looked back at the building where I'd spent 15 years of my life. Little did they know that in less than 72 hours, they would be hosting an emergency crisis meeting. Monday morning, I arrived at Integral Systems headquarters at precisely 7:30 a.m., stepping into my new role as Chief Innovation Officer. The press release went live at 7 a.m., James informed me, handing me a coffee. Industry newsletters are already picking it up. The announcement had been crafted with strategic precision. Integral Systems acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary processing algorithm, welcomes creator Dr. Rachel Kincaid as Chief Innovation Officer. It emphasized my role as the sole inventor and stated that any company currently using the technology would need to negotiate licensing agreements. At 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Michael, my lead developer. "Complete chaos here. What did you do?" I smiled. "Check your personal email. All 6 of you have offers waiting. I discreetly collected their personal contact information during my final week, citing a farewell dinner I planned to organize. Meanwhile, at Dynamic Tech, the scheduled executive meeting had morphed into an emergency crisis session. The legal team was frantically reviewing my employment contract and the documentation around the algorithm's development. At 10:45 a.m., I received an email from Edward himself. "Rachel, there appears to be a misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience." I forwarded it to Integral Systems' legal team without responding. By noon, Dynamic Tech stock had dropped 7%, while Integral Systems had seen a 14% increase. 3 technology journals had requested interviews with me about what one reporter called the intellectual property coup of the year. "How are you feeling?" James asked, stopping by my new office, a corner suite with windows on 2 sides, twice the size of my space at Dynamic Tech. "Validated," I replied honestly. 15 years of watching others take credit for my work, and now, finally, recognition. By Tuesday morning, the full impact of my departure had become clear. Dynamic Tech's flagship product relied entirely on my algorithm. Without licensing rights to my patent, they faced 2 options: negotiate with Integral Systems or rebuild their technology from scratch, a process that would take years and millions in development costs. "Edward has called an all-hands meeting," Michael texted. "Rumor is they're going to try to sue you." Our legal department responded, "Let them try. Your documentation is impeccable. We've prepared for this scenario." The respect I received at Integral Systems was a stark contrast to my final years at Dynamic Tech. When I spoke in meetings, people actually listened. My age and experience were viewed as assets rather than liabilities. By Wednesday, the industry fallout had intensified. 2 major clients had contacted Integral Systems about switching from FinanceSphere. My phone rang. Felicity from HR. "Rachel," she began, her voice lacking its usual efficiency. "I'm calling to discuss the situation with your patent. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding about ownership rights." "I don't think there's any misunderstanding," I replied calmly. "My employment agreement clearly states that intellectual property developed on my own time, using my own resources, remains mine. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss." "Any further communication should go through Integral Systems' legal department," I interrupted. "I'm sure you understand." By Friday, Dynamic Tech had entered full crisis mode. Their stock had fallen 23%, triggering concerned calls from major investors. Industry analysts were publishing pieces with titles like, "Can Dynamic Tech survive without its core algorithm?" That afternoon, Dynamic Tech's attorneys reached out to Integral Systems about licensing arrangements. Our legal team responded with terms that were technically fair but strategically painful. 3 times the standard industry rate, plus a public acknowledgement of my role as the technology's sole inventor. The following Monday, I led the first meeting with my newly assembled innovation team, which included all 6 of my former engineers from Dynamic Tech. The energy in the room was electric as we mapped out the next evolution of the algorithm. As we wrapped up, my assistant appeared at the door. "Dr. Kincaid, there's been a significant development with Dynamic Tech. Their board just announced an emergency leadership change. Edward Mitchell is stepping down, effective immediately." I maintained my composure, but inside a wave of satisfaction washed over me. "Thank you for letting me know." Within hours, industry publications were reporting that Dynamic Tech's board had lost confidence in Edward's leadership following the patent oversight. Victoria was also out, along with the head of legal. That evening, I received an email from Henry Sullivan, Dynamic Tech's newly appointed interim CEO. "Dr. Kincaid, I'd like to discuss a fair licensing arrangement for your patented technology. We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions publicly and make appropriate amends for the oversights of previous management." I forwarded the email to James. "Phase 1, complete." His reply came quickly. "Beautifully executed. Looks like Dynamic Tech is finally learning an expensive lesson about valuing innovation and innovators." 3 months later, I delivered the keynote address at the National Technology Innovation Conference, standing on the same stage where Edward had once claimed credit for my work. Today, I want to talk about innovation, ownership, and the importance of properly valuing intellectual contributions, regardless of where they come from. As I spoke, I noticed Victoria sitting in the audience, now working for a smaller firm. Our eyes met briefly, and she quickly looked away. Afterward, during the reception, several young women engineers approached me seeking advice. One confided, "Your story changed how I document my work. I started keeping detailed logs of my development process on personal time." "Smart," I replied. "Your innovations deserve protection." 1 year after being told to clean out my desk, I sat in my spacious office at Integral Systems. Under my leadership, the company had released 3 groundbreaking products built on my algorithm, capturing significant market share from Dynamic Tech. James arrived with champagne. "The board asked me to share the news with you personally. Integral Systems has officially surpassed Dynamic Tech in market valuation for the first time in company history." I smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. That's what happens when you value innovation properly. My assistant delivered an invitation to speak at Women in Technology's annual Leadership Summit. The topic, Owning Your Intellectual Value, How Proper Documentation Changed an Industry. "You've become something of an icon," James commented. "The story about the executive who didn't recognize what he had until it was gone has become a cautionary tale in corporate boardrooms." "It was never about revenge," I said, raising my glass. "It was about recognition, about showing the industry that innovation isn't anonymous. It comes from real people who deserve real credit." As the afternoon sun streamed through my office windows, I reflected on my journey. At 56, I had finally found what had eluded me throughout my career. Not just success, but acknowledgement. My name was now permanently attached to the algorithm that had changed an industry, exactly where it belonged. That morning, I'd received a message from a former colleague still at Dynamic Tech. The company was struggling to rebuild, having lost not only their core technology, but also their reputation. Edward had been unable to secure another executive position in the industry. If you've ever been dismissed, diminished, or had your contributions overlooked, remember this: documentation is power. Your work has value, your innovations matter, and sometimes the most satisfying response to being underestimated is proving exactly what they lost when they decided you were disposable. Keep records, trust your instincts, and remember that recognition delayed is not recognition denied. It's just the setup for a more satisfying conclusion.